asking you to come out and support Catherine Connolly on Friday. And I think it's really important that we get the vote out. So we need to spread the word, get out, put your number one, support Catherine Connolly. So without any further ado, I'm just going to hand you over to Dr. Margaret Kennedy. You absolutely are.
First Good morning, everybody. Not a select, wonderful crowd in front of us. We're going to report really well on this campaign. I'm actually very delighted to be here because we had a bit of a run-in, disabled people, with Heather Humphreys discussing the Green Paper, and I have here with me the petition we had as the Green Paper to stop the reform of disability benefits. Now I'm going to read my piece because that's the best way I can keep track, and I'll come back to this. I'm going to say I am delighted to be here, and we're discussing the presidential election and disabled people, which brings painful memories to me. I have a rare neuromuscular degenerative disease and I'm 73 years old. Can I say that? I'm 73. I have known humiliation in my life. None more so than the humiliation of being treated as if I didn't have much to offer the world. Just imagine, if you would, if you were denied services, employment, income, just on the basis that your body is different to everyone else's. Forced into feeling grateful all the time. The Green Paper, drawn up by Heather Humphreys' department, and Heather Humphreys probably had a say in it too, in 2024, was obscene. Of course, the background to this sort of legislation is the view that disabled people somehow were cheating the system. I do not believe for a minute that the rationale behind the changes was to benefit disabled people, or that it was out of concern or care. It was a cost-cutting exercise. Humphreys used a medical model to describe us. The medical examiner, who no doubtably would have been a non-disabled person, was to examine disabled people as to their capacity to work. I want to remind you about this. Objectification has been our history, as curiosities in the circus, as medical fodder and specimens for the Mengeleys and the researchers, used for experimentation, for trials, all to make actually normal people better. We were the guinea pigs. Then, of course, Hitler came along and tried and killed us all. Well, not all of us, but a lot of us in Germany. Hadamar. Remember Hadamar. We were then life unworthy of life. We weren't worthy of life. So 400,000 people were sterilized and 250,000 were killed in Hadamar. Humphreys wanted to bring the medical gaze upon us again. Disabled people were to be ranked, tiered according to their impairments, categorized, labeled, scrutinized. No other person is so scrutinized for employment. I was not the only person to view that piece of legislation as morally unjustifiable, objectionable. Our petition was signed by 3,325 people to stop that legislation going through. She did not look at the societal ableist views that cut disabled people off from employment. That attitude that non-disabled people are preferable to disabled people in the employment market. She wasn't going to fix the environmental structures, the economic structures, and keep disabled people out, that kept disabled people out of employment. No. Disabled people were to be categorized according to their body. It was their fault for not working. It placed disabled people as manipulators scamming the system. She only thought that cutting disability benefits would incentivize disabled people to work. It was a threat, and disabled people were terrified. Ask any disabled person whether they're unemployed. They say, yes, I'm unemployed. Have you tried to find work? Yes, I've sent hundreds of applications to people. That same legislation in the UK has caused thousands of suicides and deaths by malnutrition due to poverty. The recent budget is estimated to have brought many more disabled people into deeper poverty. No cost of living payments for disabled people yet again. As we sink lower and lower in the priorities of this government, we are asked to vote for a Fine Gael woman, Heather Humphreys, as our president. A president for all the people, she says on our banners out there. This is a kick in the teeth for those of us who protested outside Leinster House in the pouring rain. It is a kick in the teeth for the 3,345 people who signed this petition. Does anyone realise how hard it is to have our voice heard? How we paid our scarce pennies to come up to Dublin to protest? Sick, ill, in pain, disabled, suffered to protest. In pouring rain, sick and disabled people were outside the gates of Leinster House because we are never heard, and that's the only forum we have. Disabled people in Ireland are in deep poverty, where people are now beginning to choose between whether they get their prescription from the chemist or have a meal, and whether that meal is a marmalade sandwich or something more substantial. And the government and Heather Humphreys thought that the way to tackle this was to get disabled people into work. Then they'd have to do nothing. Just remember that this country was the last country to ratify the UN Convention on Rights of Disabled People. Ireland signed the UNCRDP in 2007, ratified it in 2018, and ratified the optional protocol in 2024. 17 years it took Ireland to give disabled people access to full human rights under the UN Convention. This will tell you how our government, whether it's Fianna Fáil or a coalition, think about disabled people. It is time this government really looked at how they are treating disabled people. It is not by rewarding the very woman who tried to decimate disabled people's lives with no understanding whatsoever of the lived reality under her government. For me, a disabled woman and a former academic in the field of protecting disabled people from abuse, I did that all my life, protecting disabled people from abuse, I will vote, and I will call on everyone to vote. I will remember the humiliation that Heather Humphreys wanted to put disabled people through. People I regard as my brothers and sisters, my family. I will vote accordingly. Thank you very much. These are our little figures representing our disabled community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kennedy. Margaret, that was very, very heartfelt. And again, I would say the policy that Heather Humphreys promoted is a cut and paste of the workplace capacity assessment in the UK. And Rishi Sunak was quoted as saying that if disabled citizens could use Facebook, then they could work from home and work remotely for the... it was an appalling document, and Heather Humphreys repeatedly says, but it was just a discussion document. But you know, if I wrote a discussion document about how to burn down your house, it would be equally as reprehensible. So again, I would say we need to be really clear about this. For our community of disabled citizens and carers, a vote for the government candidate is an act of self-harm. It would be an act of collective self-harm. There's only one option, and that is vote for Catherine Connolly, but we need to get out on Friday and rock that vote. So I'm now going to hand you over to Marianne.
Can I just say one word to Marianne? She said she heard us. She said, the reason I pulled the document was because I heard people. But she didn't come out outside the gates of the door that day.
Yeah. And actually, just to be clear on that, Heather Humphreys defended the Green Paper to the hilt.
Absolutely.
I called a private member's bill in the Seanad, and she argued, and she would not take any amendments. Like I had suggestions like making disability benefit a non-means tested universal payment. She pushed back, and I called a vote, and the government voted 2-1 in favour of the Green Paper, including their disability spokespersons. So I want to be really clear. When Heather says that she was the braver person to withdraw the paper, she was forced to withdraw it by the newly elected Taoiseach Simon Harris, and it was a cowardly attack on the dignity and the autonomy and the independence of disabled citizens. And I'm sorry now, we're both after interrupting you, Marianne. So I'm going to hand you over to Marianne Madani. Thank you.
Thank you guys for those amazing words. There might be some repetition in what I'm about to say, but it's worth repeating because, as Margaret said, we're still not being heard clearly. And we're here today because we believe that Heather Humphreys' candidacy is proof that the government does not value or hear its disabled citizens. We are not here to smear, but to speak the truth. the truth of the experience of the disabled community in Ireland, and the wrongdoing of a person who would seek to represent the well-being of the nation. When the Green Paper was first announced, we were horrified that such a policy could possibly be conceived by our government, and that it was thought of as a good idea by people such as Humphreys, who clearly believed it should be approved and implemented. It felt as though the decades of campaigning from the disability rights movement had come to naught. The government had clearly not been listening to any of it. It was an obvious violation of our basic human rights and dignity as expressed under the UNCRPD. A brief reminder of what the Green Paper would have done if it had been allowed to proceed further, and I know Margaret has already elaborated. It would have subjected all disabled people on disability allowance to external assessments and categorised disabled people into 3 tiers based solely on their deemed capacity to work. Disability cannot be clearly classified as such. No criteria was given as to who the external medical reviewers hired would be, or the cost of subjecting everyone on disability allowance to this. In order to qualify for disability allowance, claimants have already required approval from our GPs, just to be clear. The Green Paper would also have forced an estimated 84% of recipients to engage with Intrio in order to keep their payments. The paper did not include any proposals to train Intrio officers to deal with disabled applicants or to remove any societal barriers to employment, such as improving workplace accessibility. The aim was not, as Heather Humphreys still claims, simply to increase support for those with more severe impairments. We of course agree this should be done, but if that was the motive, they would simply have developed an additional supplement or programme to support those with additional needs. The clear aim was to weed out the welfare scroungers that the media always claim are in the thousands on welfare, and to reduce the amount of people on disability allowance. Disability allowance is a measly 9,000 to 10,000 euro a year. It is already impossible to pay rent, food, medical bills, medical equipment and supplies and survive on this. It is nowhere near a cost of living payment, such as the PUP or basic income for the arts of around 1,400 a month. The Indicon report showed that the additional cost of living with a disability is 12,000 a year, and that's before rent, food and the aforementioned supplies. The disability rights movement has been calling for a non-means tested disability allowance as the only way to reduce poverty and increase employment amongst disabled people for years. The Green Paper was a further step backward from this. The Scrap the Green Paper Coalition, which was chaired by Keir Doyle of Neuropride Ireland, came about through the coming together of a few of us community leaders in the grassroots disability rights movement. We were starting to notice within our DPOs, Neuropride Ireland, Disability Power Ireland, Access for All, that our members, having read the Green Paper, were extremely distressed about the implications. Dr. Margaret Kennedy was the first to organise a petition against it, which had garnered 2,000 signatures. That has now reached 3,345. We all decided that the only way to make it clear how dangerous this policy was and to actually have our voices heard was to protest. Heather Humphreys did not reply to our messages or seek to speak to us or understand our concerns. She treated our protests, petitions and communication as if it was all overblown, rather than listening to why disabled people were so upset or attempting to understand our concerns and our rights. She recently promised to bring honesty, compassion and service to her role as president, but I'm sorry to say that her treatment of us has been the opposite. The response from Humphreys and government officials continues to be that this was just a consultation report. We know that there was a strong desire to implement it, dismissing the considerable efforts of the disabled community to express why we were so furious that these proposals were even being brought forth. Just goes to show that they continue not to listen or care about the injustices we face on a daily basis. They continue to see poverty not as a systemic failure but as an individual one. Humphreys also recently said that she was the braver person to rescind the Green Paper. There is nothing brave about being forced to retract a policy because it was recognised as a human rights violation of one of the country's most marginalised groups. She still, to this day, would rather defend and praise her own actions than seek to understand and support the marginalised community she has affronted or admit that she got it dangerously wrong. What should the government be doing to get it right? This is what we need, what we have repeatedly been saying for years. We need a non-means tested disability payment which covers the additional cost of living with a disability, that is a cost of living payment. This is the only way to lift disabled people out of poverty and to support our entry into employment without fear of losing our medical card and our basic supports. Building more social housing to end the housing crisis, putting an end to the waiting lists for life-saving treatments are also essential. There is so much that needs to change to improve the lives of disabled people and all those facing poverty, homelessness and mistreatment at the hands of the state. It starts with listening to the voices of those who are facing these situations. Catherine Connolly, I believe, is listening. And any person such as Heather Humphreys, who clearly is not, has no right to be lauded as a representative of the people of Ireland, presidential or otherwise. If she is representative of anything, it is the things in this country that need to change.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I'm going to hand you over to Bernard and Graham. But just to say, again, like, in terms of the medical model of disability, Ireland doesn't even meet the minimum threshold of that. And we have hundreds of children who can't get spinal surgery, who can't get routine urological surgery, and who are suffering on waiting lists. We have thousands and thousands of disabled citizens who cannot get routine therapies, supports and medical interventions. And yet, Minister Humphreys wanted to compulsorily medically examine 250,000 people in receipt of disability allowance over a 5-year period. That would be to medically examine, against their will, 1,000 disabled persons every week, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year for 5 years, wasting a precious medical resource on what is not something that she got dangerously wrong, but a deliberate and ableist assault on our community. Completely contrary to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In fact, what she proposed was monstrous.
It was humiliating.
Absolutely.
Absolutely humiliating. And it was objectification of the worst kind. We have been examined from top to toe by every Tom, Dick and Harry, and she wanted to add another one. I mean, it was just ridiculous. It was awful.
And like, make no mistake about it. Within her political party, Fine Gael, there is an ideological resistance to giving disabled citizens and carers socioeconomic rights. We saw it in the Green Paper and we saw it in the Care referendum, which Heather Humphreys was the director of that Yes campaign. So let's be in no doubt, such a person cannot represent our community. And our community of carers and disabled citizens is in excess of 1.5 million citizens, not our president. So again, before I hand you over to Bernard, vote Catherine Connolly number 1 and let's get the vote out on Friday. Let's send a clear message to this government that, as you said, Marianne, they represent everything that needs to change.
Mary's going to speak ahead of me. So
sorry, Greg. So I'll introduce you to Greg Merrigan.
Look, I'm quite angry listening to both the kind of sentiments there, because before the Green Paper was even proposed, conditions were really not adequate at all. So when the Green Paper came up, and then obviously Heather Humphreys became a candidate, I even got more dismayed and angry. But just to give you some what's happening on the ground with people like me and my peers. I mean, last October I was ringing my occupational therapist in Dún Laoghaire to get a routine service of my wheelchair. And at the end of the call, when I logged that, now keeping in mind, when you log that call, it's probably 3 months or 2 months before you actually get the service, depending on the extremities of what you need done. However, at the end of that call, so prior to this call, apologies, Monday to Friday, you could call your occupational therapist only between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. 1 hour a day, 5 hours per week. At the end of that call, the occupational therapist, who wasn't my actual OT, but said to me, Graham, if you have any local representation, you wouldn't mind vouching for us, because we've just got word post-budget that the hours have been cut. And I'm like, hours have been cut from 5 hours a week to what? She said, it's now Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I could only call if I had an issue with my chair, if a caster front wheel came off my chair, and my chair is my legs. So if I had something wrong on a Tuesday morning, I'd have to depend on a friend to give me a lend of a hand-me-down or whatever. But I couldn't log that. because the government, Fine Gael, cut those hours. So that they're the type of things that are happening on the ground. And also you have to constant proving of your disability. I was born with spina bifida 41 years ago, and I'm tired and I'm exhausted. We fight for everything. And to see somebody, a candidate, to say president for all is the most insulting. I'm dismayed by it. I'm so angry by it. I was invited in the last 14 years I volunteer. I was invited to the Áras twice on 2 occasions for my work on voluntary work. If Heather Humphreys was to be elected president and I was invited, I would not be going back to the Áras, because it's just an absolute disgrace. And there's more anecdotal stories of constantly proving your disability. Constantly, I run a wheelchair basketball team. There's many of those players that their medical cards have just out of the blue have been taken off them. They have to then prove their disability. They go into a room to prove what they can use, prove what limb. It's just completely demeaning. And it's just very. It makes me very, very angry. That's all I really have to say.
That's it. So, I'll give you Bernard Mulvaney.
So I'm going to. So I find this stuff very emotional.
So just to explain for context, Bernard is. We've been protesting along with our friends for the best part of 20 years. And Bernard, like myself, is a parent and a carer. And under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as parents and carers, we're mandated to speak out on the lived experience of disability.
Yeah, and I find it very emotional at times doing that. I was when I was first told that Catherine would be running for the Áras, I was more than happy to absolutely weigh in to the campaign and become a part of that movement, due to a few facts. She's a Galway woman, first of all, which is very important. But while we were protesting outside the gates of the Dáil for the Green Paper, the CARES referendum, the first person to stand up in our Dáil and speak on our behalf was Catherine, against what seemed like a movement within government and at times opposition, who for some nefarious reason were backing particularly the care referendum, which personally was 3 of the most difficult months of my life as a carer. But she always got up and spoke with a very elegant, kind tone and put across our views as carers and how the state was failing us consistently and our community. And as I said, at a lot of the time she was the lone voice. So it was a no-brainer for me when I was told she would be running for the Áras. That is the person, as a carer, as a father of a child with a disability, who I want to see as the head of this state, a state that talks a lot of the time about inclusion and talks about its citizens coming together, but in effect, particularly with the government we have, it's really about money, and if you're going to cost us money, you're not really included in the whole narrative. And it was actually 2 nights ago I heard Heather Humphreys say that she had engaged with the Green Paper. She had engaged with those who had campaigned against it. We never heard, not sight nor sound, of Heather Humphreys. She ignored us in the pouring rain. She ignored us in the cold, the wind.
She did.
We fought outside that gate and never a peep. And I mean, the first major protest we did, I mean, I'll never forget it because we were so exhausted at the end of it. And we got word back that no, this was going ahead, like this was going through. So we said, now we have to double down. We have to gather ourselves again and fight this Tory policy. And that's what it was, straight out of the Tory playbook. And if anyone knows anything about the Tory party, they hate disabled people. They detest them. They are a blight. And so to hear Catherine standing up in our Dáil and speaking on our behalf, and at times the only voice, that reaffirmed to me that that was someone that was a comrade, someone understood me as a parent with a child with a disability, understood our community, had great empathy, and just this week she did a wonderful thing where she came out to the IWA and we had 2 hours with our beautiful disability community, and she was so kind and caring, and there was no press there, there was no media, but it was so honest and true. And Heather Humphreys was invited to that. She was invited to do a similar event, and she didn't even reply to the IWA. Jim Gavin replied, but we all know what happened there. But Heather Humphreys didn't even reply to say no or yes. And that, to me, that sums it all up. And we saw her inside in DCU, and, you know, giving a platform to our community and empowering the voices like Anne and Marianne. That's the voice, like Graham. These are the voices you need to hear. You don't always need to hear Tom and myself, but that's what we need to hear. And just listening to their stories today, and my daughter, who again has no problem speaking out, but I still understand that it's incumbent on me to be able to build that platform so that she can make her way as an independent citizen, and she'll be able to look at her Uachtaráin na hÉireann and know that Catherine Connolly supports her, represents her,
How's that back?
and will always have an open door for her to go in and say what she needs to say and be an equal in that society. Heather Humphreys won't offer her that. Won't offer her that. Okay. That's me. Thank you very much.
Can I just say something, Tom?
Please do, yeah.
We've talked a lot about the children and the adults about employment, because largely we're talking about the Green Paper, but please remember the nursing homes. The older people, I'm 73, the older people are having terrible time in the nursing homes. They are disabled people. It's from cradle to the grave. Just because you reach 65 doesn't mean to say your disability disappears somewhere. You are still a disabled person in those nursing homes. You are still a disabled person who's been raped, Emily and 22 others in another nursing home, been abused, been neglected, been let fall out of wheelchairs. I heard a story the other day of an older woman who fell out of a wheelchair. She spent 2 days in the nursing home in extreme agony. She was taken to hospital 2 days after falling out and found to have 2 broken legs, femurs. She died six days later. These are our people. It's from the cradle to the grave. Residential elderly people are our people. And HICWA need to get their act together, because they're not doing a very good job so far. So we're talking about, it's a real kick in the teeth to have Heather Humphreys on those boards along the post, you know, the light post and lamp post outside. Every time I see it, President for all. She's not a president for anyone, I don't think. Well, she must be, because some people do follow her. But she's not our president, or will never be. And I'm convinced that if she is come our president, I'll be the first one outside the Irish with a post to say not our president. But there you go.
So I'm just going to open it up to the floor if anybody